Okay, you might have missed it given all the national political news spinning around us so far this year, but February is also a big legislative month for state assemblies and legislatures meeting all over the nation. Each year, a myriad of design-build legislation is debated in state houses, and it's up to DBIA's advocacy team to track, manage, support, or oppose bills that impact America's design-build teams. Welcome to the Design Build Institute of America's Design Build Delivers podcast. I'm Kim Wright. Today we're talking to Richard Thomas, DBIA's Director of State and Local Legislative Affairs, about legislative efforts nationwide and DBIA's top priorities for 2020. All right, well, thank you, Richard, for joining us. We're in the midst of legislative season, so you're not really in the office much. You're all over the map.
That's true. It's, this is like our annual conference every day.
Racking up those extra flight miles.
Yes. Going to lots of exotic places.
Like Wisconsin and okay.
Yeah, that says it all.
We'll get to that. So let's start at the 10,000 foot level about DBI advocacy in general. Obviously, for private folks, they can do what they need to do and have been practicing design build for years and years and years. On the public side, our advocacy department has worked for decades to make sure that public agencies have that same opportunity. Give me a little history. We can't show the map, unfortunately. We love our green map, but tell me a little bit about how far we've come from an advocacy perspective.
It's really been amazing. As most folks know, in 1993, we only had 3 states that have design build authority, and now we only have 2 states that are holdouts. And even in the 10 years that I've been here, if you go back then, most states had very little transportation authority, and now we're just down to a handful of states there. And it's been incredible to see that change, because every state has its own culture, its own challenges. The approaches you take in one state, you can't use in another. But I think the thing that's key for us, because we are a small group, we actually have to practice what we preach. We have to collaborate with other associations, with other stakeholders. And I think that approach, we've had really good success. I think this last year we had like a 76% success rate, which is about triple the industry average. And I think that really says a lot about not so much us, but the message that we're conveying to folks.
Because success kind of breeds success. I mean, we're lucky in that we have had, as states continue to deliver successful projects, it's hard to ignore.
That's true. And I think also, too, you'll see our mission will evolve. Our primary goal has always been to have design build authority for all states. And then the primary goal, which will eventually verge to the primary goal, has been to decodify best practices. As we have wide acceptance of design build, everybody's doing a different flavor, and some of the innovations they come up with are great, but that's something that we have to take on a state by state basis. And also there's always that the danger of going backwards. Legislatures change over time. You get new folks in, and sometimes you lose that institutional knowledge. So it's important for us to not only to get that authority, get those best practices, but then you have to preserve what you've passed.
You've mentioned that diversity. I mean, when we get to that place, and we will, where all 50 states have design build authority, it's still going to look very, very different, and the job is going to be far from done.
It does, and I think you also, I mean, I look at some of the successes that we had last year. We had historic legislation in both New York, Wisconsin, and in Washington State. In New York, we had all agencies in New York City now have design build authority, and we had the nation's first progressive design build law in Washington, and in Wisconsin, where we were finally, after you know, the whole 10 years I've been here at DBIA, we've been trying to get design build authority for the DOT in Wisconsin, and we finally got that passed. We were able to preserve authority in Virginia. We were able to expand and preserve authority in Illinois, and but that also gives you there's still challenges out there.
So let's talk about our priorities for this year. And every year is different, but let's talk about this year, because you've already truly been all over the map. It's only early February with many more months to go. What would you consider our most notable challenges and opportunities for 2020?
Well, I think New York certainly has to be. I mean, when I started at DBIA, the procurement laws had not changed in New York in over 100 years.
Wow.
And it took us 5 years to even get a bill out of committee in New York. And we finally got authority for the big 6 agencies. But New York City, probably arguably the biggest construction market in the country, one of the biggest construction markets in the world, did not have design build authority. With the legislation that we passed last year, we were able to get that authority, and they're moving ahead. And it kind of ties into, of course, legislation there this year. The governor's budget is very ambitious. We're talking, combined with his other programs, $275 billion in construction. And if you look at those agencies, those are all agencies that either have worked hard to get authority, and they've also demonstrated not only the ability but the willingness to use it. So we're really looking at probably over the next 10 years being just a design build renaissance in New York. And also included in that budget bill is a further expansion of design build. It would also include authority for the Office of General Services, the Dormitory Authority, the Urban Development Corporation, the State University Construction, and also for several, for the Olympic Region Development Authority, the Battery and Park City Authority. And there's also several projects that are earmarked in that budget bill. Some of those would fall under those agencies I just named. So, and I think the other thing, if one looks at Governor Cuomo's budget moving forward, the only way he's going to be able to deliver that is expanding or eliminating the sunset on those big 6 agencies at the state level. So, it's been amazing to see in 10 years a transition from being a state where almost nothing was allowed to being a state that could be the most progressive design build state in the country, if all of these ambitious plans the governor has reaches fruition.
And you would think, given the success that we've seen already with that limited authority, I mean, some of the biggest bridge projects and road projects, even the Port Authority's done a bunch in New York too, that type of success, completely hard to ignore, would make it easier to make that case for getting rid of the sunset. Because most people, when you pass bills, they think it's done and over, one and done, right?
Well, exactly, and I think probably the one of the best kept secrets is the New York DOT has quietly done 40 design build projects in New York, and they've really had great success. And I think it's hard to argue with success. And certainly if we are going to move forward on these projects that are in the pipeline, also the Midway, which would, with the Metro Transit Authority, they by law, any project over $25 million must use design build. We're really going to see some huge changes, and I think where it's really exciting, from our part, is those projects are really going to be a project that touch people's lives. They're going to make people's commutes every day easier, are going to provide housing for the homeless. I mean, it's really going to change the face of New York, in my opinion.
And you mentioned design, build, done right, and our efforts to make sure that when laws are passed that they actually represent best practices. I mean, there's nothing worse than having an owner get started and then do it wrong. It fails. You think design build fails, and the truth is they just didn't quite go about it the right way. You look at New York DDC, Department of Design Construction. They have embraced, again, brand new authority, totally all in on the idea of training, learning how to do it right.
Well, I think that's crucial, and I really applaud them for doing that. If you look at the cost of training compared to the investments you're making, it's pennies on the dollar.
Right. So we're talking about New York. You go all the way to the other coast. California has been doing design build for a good long time, but they've got activity going on legislatively too.
Well, they do. I mean, California's got it going on. Probably more than any other state, they're really trying. They're doing some out of the box things. I mean, you see progressive design build being used out there. A lot of the projects that they're doing are very complex that really require using design build. Because we have pretty broad authority in California, every year, we're picking up a new authority that's created or one that fell through the cracks. So we are expanding. We do have one bill expanding authority on a pipeline project. One of the things that I think speaks a lot to the value of design build is both in states like, well, actually the three right offhand, California, Washington, and Minnesota, where they actually, as part of their budgeting process, will earmark projects specifically for design build, where they feel it's not only is the project important, but it's important enough that we want to make sure it's done using design build. So I mean, we've had years where there's been as much as $1 billion of projects earmarked for design build. So that's one of the things that we'll be working through on the process. So I think we're really going in the right direction in California. I think that was certainly one of those states that 10 years ago when I first started had very, very limited authority, and I think they've gone light years in 10 years. They're really doing some progressive things out there that and what's interesting enough is, with California and New York, they really only consider themselves peers. So right. Maybe some friendly competition in best practices, which would, I think that's a good thing.
Benefits us all.
Benefits us all, especially the taxpayers. Two of the states on our priority list, Wisconsin and Virginia. In Virginia's case, this is a state that has a long history of doing design build right. They have a new majority, a lot of new legislators, and you already have folks that want to go backwards that are introducing legislation with bad practices, and we have to be vigilant. We're to make sure that we educate legislators in that regard, and also in Wisconsin. Before the ink had a chance to dry on the Virginia bill, we already have legislation introduced that would reduce the full authority to a 6 pilot project, and that's one of those things that's really kind of a shame, because I've seen the Wisconsin DOT over the last 6 months really doing all the right things. They've been in peer exchanges with other DOTs. They've been meeting with DOTs that have experience to talk about their particular challenges and opportunities. They've worked closely with federal highways, and and they're also interested in training and in networking with other folks. They're really trying to learn design build, and I'd like to see them be able to have that chance to move forward and be successful. But sometimes, well, as you know, change is hard. Yeah. And but that's we'll be back in Madison tomorrow, and hopefully we can cooler heads can prevail on this legislation.
And that is such an interesting example because, as you said, we barely got the authority under the belt before there was efforts to try to really already finagle, rework it a little bit, which is odd.
Well, and what's surprisingly there is people forget it was design bid build that got them into the problem,
Right.
into the situation they were in. They really had an issue with cost certainty on project, and as we know, that's something that design build can take care of. That's one of the reasons owners use design build. So, we're hoping over the next 6 months, between our conversations with other stakeholders and with the DOT and the governor's office, that that we can turn that ship around.
Let's just stay in that region then. Iowa is one of those notable two holdouts, and someplace that you've spent a lot of time in trying to help them get there.
It is. It's been really tough. The Board of Regents is the only owner in the state that has a design build authority, and every year for the last 5 years, we've had to fight legislation not only to strip that authority away, but we felt there that the best defense was a good offense, and we figured this was an opportunity for us to educate legislators what design build really was. So we've built a coalition of dozens of firms and associations and owners groups, and we've just introduced legislation this week, actually, House Study Bill 586, and we think that this is going to be a real opportunity to get the idea of design build out there as an option for folks. We're working very closely with local governments, the counties, the folks that do the projects, labor, and also with the A&E community and contractors, and nobody has built a broader coalition than we have there. Our bill would allow not only design build but also CMAR authority. It would be an option. Nobody would be required to make any changes. If they want to continue to do design bid build, they could, but it would give all those owners that option on the building side. And we'll just have to see. We've been successful in the last few years in blocking the anti-design build legislation. We're hoping this year that we can move the ball farther down the field in regards to getting design build authority expanded.
To some degrees, this one felt like Wisconsin, and it was truly just that fear of change. When you've always delivered your projects the same way, that why change approach seems to holding them back.
It's fear of the unknown, because as you know, every study that out there has shown that alternative delivery, particular design build, outperforms every other delivery method. But for a lot of folks, the old way of doing things, it's very comfortable, and there's also for some folks that fear of more competition, and but I think by every measure we've seen that those fears really they're not real.
So, a pitch for that Iowa coalition, Iowans for Project Innovation, which is iowaapd.org. Because again, APD meaning we're trying to make sure that they have every tool in the toolkit, not just design build, but CMAR too. So, anybody who feels inclined, you can actually join the coalition from their website too, which they're looking for good Iowa folks to make that. Like you said, it's already a very diverse coalition.
It is, and I think anything anybody wants to know about design build, all those resources are right there at the website. So it's really a good tool for folks interested in that legislation. Also in the Midwest, there is legislation that would expand design build in the wastewater area in Nebraska. That was, most of the state has been covered at the local level, the state level. The agencies can do that, but it would expand that for local governments. So that's pending as well.
So we also talked about the need for us to be nimble in all of these states because they're all of those authorizing pieces of legislation are different and they're responding to different needs and challenges. And it actually kind of reminds me of our approach generally. I mean, design build has to be nimble. Design build is evolving. For example, with progressive, you mentioned in Washington they made a change to their statute to make sure that progressive would be something that they could do. So I would imagine that as progressive spreads, we're going to see similar approaches just to make sure that that's a tool in their toolkit as well.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think the one thing that we're seeing is, if you look at the trends over the last 5 years, is we're seeing a lot more variations. Progressive would certainly fit into that category. We know it's been big in the water sector and in aviation, but now we have 2 DOTs that are using it, Utah and in Maryland. And also Virginia is working on a very small progressive design build project. And I think you're gonna see more of that, because one of the things that we're seeing, and it's funny because some of these problems, they almost solve themselves. I saw a provision in a Wisconsin bill that was dealing with, the situation, what do you do when you don't have the complete scope? Well, it sounds like progressive design build. And interestingly enough, even though that is something in conversations with that DOT that they're interested in. So I think for each of those situations, as design build becomes more developed, states are going to start to look at those different options. I think the real challenge will be I think folks are starting to realize that what progressive design build is, in some cases they've already been doing it for years. They just didn't have a name for it.
Right.
I think Georgia with their DOT would probably be an example with that. They did some projects even before that word was out there. So I think you're going to see more states that are going to probably tweak their laws a little bit, as opposed to, a standalone progressive design build. And I think the key thing there is every state should work at their pace, at their, as they develop it. They need to walk before they can run. But I think that is the progression. I think we're going to, certainly all the trends are going that way.
So you're not going to get any sleep much between now and May, June. You're going to hit the road, building up those miles. How are you feeling about 2020 overall?
Well, I feel really good. I was so excited when I saw. After everything we did in New York last year, it was kind of like, well, what else can we do in New York? And then we see the governor's budget, and you start to look at. There was all these projects that kind of sat on the shelf, or the needs were well identified, but a lot of the agencies didn't have authority. Now they have the authority. They're getting the training. They're getting all their ducks in a row. And I think you're going to see, some of these projects are going to be mega projects that are really going to change the face of New York. And so we're going to see firsthand, how it really performs, and America's eyes will literally be watching. And I think also too, what we're finding is, we're always going to have the challenge, once we have authority, of fighting to preserve that. Our enemy there is not. There's always going to be some folks that are going to introduce legislation to try to create some niche market. We see that with legislation for thresholds or some micro market. But I think the big thing is we can't rest on our laurels. About every 10 years, a legislature will turn over. And the challenge for us is we can't assume that the freshman legislator that just got elected knows about design, build, or procurement. In Virginia, we've had several best value bills introduced because folks weren't aware that best value was an inherent part of design build, and that they actually could. They just didn't have some of those things contained within it, codified. So we also have to be mindful and careful. Sometimes well-intentioned legislators, just because they don't know how all these pieces fit together, aren't manipulated by those folks that would like to turn the clock back.
It's an exciting time to be a design builder. Thanks so much, Richard.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to DBIA's Richard Thomas for that legislative update. If you'd like to see more about the status of design build in your state or nationwide, take a look at our interactive pending legislation map and our updated 2020 state statute report. You can find both on our website at dbia.org/advocacy/state.